Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FA Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I'm the Director of PR, Social, and Events here at First Advantage. And as you can see, I've got a great crew with me today, a great panel. And our title of our episode today is From One-Time Screening to a Full Life Cycle of Trust. So with me today, we have Lacey from SambaSafety, Schnee and Evan Stinson from First Advantage. So thank you to all three of you for joining me on this episode of FA Live. I would love if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves to our audience. So Rich, I have you up top with me. You'll go ahead and kick us off here.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. Hello, everybody. Lacey. I'm the Chief Product Officer at SambaSafety. SambaSafety, I've spent the last decade focused on driver compliance, safety, and coaching, all in an effort to improve driver performance, make our roads safer, and get our drivers home every night. Really excited to be here on FA Live.
Yes, and we're excited to have you. Thank you, Rich. Ken, we'll kick it over to you now.
Absolutely. Ken Schnee, I am our head of sales here at First Advantage. Super excited, Caitlin, to be back on the show. Always a pleasure. But really today, and my goal here at First Advantage is really to help organizations understand how they can optimize their screening program. And in the world we live in today, where technology is changing in a moment's notice, it's really important that we all stay on top of exactly what is important to us, and that is efficiency. So that's what I'm all about. Looking forward to talking through that today. And I'll pass off to Evan to introduce himself.
So I'm talking with Evan on the side. He's actually having some audio issues. So we're going to move this along here. I'll have Evan introduce himself when he can actually hear me. So that's the problem. He can see my lips moving, but he can't hear me. Ken, thank you for introducing yourself, and thank you for being here again. Okay, Evan, you're here with us. You can hear? No? Okay. It's okay. We're going to figure Evan out. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. I do want to remind our audience, if you are watching live, you can ask questions throughout the show. You'll just go on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube and put your question in the comment section. And I will get the questions over to these three as I see appropriate throughout our conversation. So let's start. We'll set the scene. It's perfect. My first question is actually for Ken and Rich. So Evan, we'll get you in here, I promise. So let's set the scene. Let's start with the big shift we're seeing in the transportation industry. Why is one-time background screening no longer enough? So Ken, I'll start with you and then we'll give it over to Rich.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. So what's interesting about this concept in general of the one-time screening is that I have forever felt, even myself, that in this industry, it is one check at the time that you're being hired and then everything else. And if I was to look around the room here, I see years and years of experience within our organization. And the thing that was always amazing to me is that the risk, it continues to grow as employees or drivers are within your company. But yet, as an industry, it was always focused on that initial check. And really what's become part of a norm within the industry and within risk in general is to really look at the full life cycle of a hire, and not just the risk when you are hiring them, but the risk without. And that's truly where our partnership along with SambaSafety really shines. And it comes down to not just the picture at the time of hire, but the full picture of risk as that person moves through your organization and hopefully stays for a long time. Rich, maybe you can give a little bit more on really how that risk is uncovered, specifically with monitoring and Samba and the full picture.
Yeah, well said, Ken. It's, when I look at our industry, we're going to hire between 600 and 800,000 drivers this year. You can look at that data in any number of ways, but we can all agree we're going to hire a lot of drivers this year. And every single one of those drivers, we're going to bring into the organization, and we're going to hand them the most dangerous tool we hand any employee in the workforce. And that's a steering wheel. Driving is the leading cause of workplace fatalities. 38% of all fatalities in the workforce are the result of transportation-related incidents. So first of all, this is a problem worth focusing on and worth solving. And the pre-employment check is a critical component of it. We'll talk a lot about that over the next half hour or so, no doubt. But those one-time checks, if it's all you do, they're out of date the minute they're completed, especially on something as dynamic as driver performance and driver compliance and driver safety. And one doesn't replace the other, they reinforce each other. That pre-employment check becomes a really, really effective baseline or jumping off point for monitoring. And that's why monitoring has become the de facto industry standard for drivers today. And not just professional drivers, the regulated drivers driving tractor trailers, but also professionals who drive at work, people who use a vehicle to get to their place of work, whether they're in the field services, construction, oil and gas, home health care. There are a lot more drivers out there in the workforce than you think when you first look at it. So really, it's anybody who gets behind the wheel during the workday for any reason is at issue here. So it's like I said, this is a problem worth solving, worth focusing.
Yeah. And we'll definitely talk through that problem solving on today's episode. But, Rich, what really stood out to me there, and I'm sure it stood out to our audience, is that talking about how a check happens and it's already dated at that point. So how do we continue to fix that? Great news. Evan is back. He can hear us. So Evan, I have a question for you, but you need to introduce yourself first to the audience. So you'll introduce yourself and then you'll answer this question. Can you give an example of how an employer might miss a major risk, if they only rely on that pre-hire check?
Yeah, hello, Evan Stinson, First Advantage Solutions Engineer. I get to really work with customers in two parts. One is managing risk and trust decisions, and the other one is optimizing compliance processes. So all of those things go together, and they work really well with this conversation. So I'm glad I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me now, and we're all good. The question, it really dovetailed with what Rich said. I like the way you specified the difference between regulated and non-regulated, right? Regulated requires that periodic recheck. That's the government standard. We have that requirement. You have to do that. But even that data is going to be invalid or potentially out of date the day after you ran it. So yeah, you ran your pre-screen MVR in January. Now it's almost April. Did this person make any bad decisions on St. Patrick's Day a couple weeks ago? Those are the types of things that you just don't have visibility to if you're not running your annual until next January on the hire date. On the non-regulated side, it's just as bad, potentially even more so, because there isn't the requirement. Like legally from the FMCSA, there's not a definition that says you have to go pull this information. And that's where I think there's a lot of potential to really not have current information, potential to really not know what you don't know. And unfortunately, in those situations, like not knowing can hurt you.
Yeah. So, Evan, I'll stay with you because what are some of the misconceptions that employers still have around background checks that are kind of leading to these gaps that you've outlined?
The first thing that we see is like people believing like a periodic recheck covers them. It's better than not doing it. If you're feeling guilt in any way, I'm not casting guilt today. But that periodic recheck is only valid to that point. In reality, like delayed visibility to an issue is really the same as not having visibility at all. If you could have known sooner and didn't take action, you're really in an exposed position in that regard. So you have to take the steps to get the information as quickly as you can. And that's where the First Advantage and SambaSafety process really works well together.
So it's pretty clear 10 minutes into our conversation that continuous driver monitoring matters. Rich, what does continuous driver monitoring solve that screening alone cannot?
Yeah, great question. And Evan, I really liked how you summed it up, and it's important that concept of not knowing is not a defense. And we're in a world where if you could have known, you should have known, and the onus is on you as a company. So problems that monitoring solves. Here's the great thing. Risk is not random. In fact, it's quite predictable with data. So bringing in all this data allows us to solve some really fundamental challenges and problems for our customers. First, qualifications. Is your driver qualified? Do they have the appropriate history? Do they have the necessary endorsements and restrictions? Are they compliant? Do they have a medical certificate? Is their CDL status valid? Behavioral. Are they a habitual speeder? Are they a great driver at work and a terrible driver on the weekends? Do they run red lights? Do they have more serious things lurking on their history, like reckless or careless driving or a DUI that may come back to haunt you? And all of these data feeds can create a comprehensive driver profile that can drive decision making in your fleet and in your org. And I think most impactfully, it drives the opportunity for training and coaching. We know that if you can get the right type of reinforcement and support to a driver at the right time and deliver it in an effective method and means, it will have a big impact. It will make that driver better. And that has all kinds of implications when it comes to retention as well. And when you bring all these things together, you have the opportunity to create a tremendous amount of value for your organization.
Yeah, so can we dive into that value a little bit more? So kind of the value that's being seen. So Rich, and then Evan, please follow up as well.
Yeah, so the value question is an interesting one. We took a deep look into our customer base. This is thousands of fleets, about 6 million drivers that are continuously monitored in our driver population. And what we found was really quite impressive. After the first year of monitoring and monitoring alone, we saw a 32% reduction in violations across the board. When fleets added training on top of just monitoring, that 32% turned into 77% reduction in violations. Now, reduction in violations is nice. It's what that causes and creates the result of that reduction in violations, which was a 14% reduction in crashes. And crashes are the thing that we're in the business of preventing. It's the thing that that contributes to driving being the number one cause of fatalities in the workforce. And when you can reduce your crashes by double-digit percentages, it impacts all aspects of the business. It impacts the risk profile of the business, the costs of the business, the insurance premiums of the business, and obviously the safety of your workforce, your employees, and the communities you operate in.
I think the other thing tagging on to that, is you're describing all of the benefits, which everyone wants to sign up for the benefits, but it's the process of how you get there. I think that's where the great impact comes in. Obviously, the benefits are the reason why, but the how matters. Mm-hmm. The how is important in did you do your MVR up front? Did you do identity up front? Did you validate this person is who they say they are throughout the process? You talked about being able to start with the qualification aspect and have confidence in that aspect, but it's really the process holistically that allows the reduction in accidents, reduction in moving violations, and really drilled into like, how do you remove the surprises in the process, right? When you have the data and the process integrated holistically, that's how you're really getting the business value of those great benefits at the end.
Evan, I'll stay with you here, and then Rich, I'd love your thoughts on this as well. How does continuous driver monitoring impact compliance and audit readiness?
I think the documentation matters. Obviously, from a compliance perspective, you might have a regulator coming in to look at it and audit it, full audit. But you can even get into like the insurers and if you're ever in a court case, right? Having the full audit trail of oversight, showing that you're managing the process end to end, really being proactive is really getting you to a point where that compliance and readiness happens because of the proactivity of the way the systems work together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. A compliant fleet is a safer fleet, hands down. And compliance is really, it should be the cornerstone of a safety program. And historically, driver qualification management has been a highly manual process. It's been inefficient. It's probably been prone to human error. And when you can integrate your identity, your pre-employment, your compliance, and your ongoing monitoring and safety program together, especially when it comes to qualifications, it creates what I call like the ability to do live updates. So what I mean by that is a core part of the driver qualification file is the MVR. You're looking at, you have the MVR on file, do you have the medical certificate on file, is it valid? When you bring these two disciplines together, you can push those MVRs into the qualification file. There's no longer a paper process, a syncing or a swivel chair process. It's always there, up to date, and it relieves the administrative burden and allows you to focus on more strategic things.
So we'll stay on the topic of compliance as we move into our next section, which is really about reframing driver monitoring as operational intelligence. So Ken, traditionally screening is viewed as a compliance function. How does this monitoring shift that conversation?
Yeah, very, very interesting question, because I would say that compliance is probably at the center of everything we do. So for me to take a question and move it away from that is really based on the fact that I don't think we're all here doing this just because it's the compliant thing to do. I think we're actually all here because we want to reduce risk in our organization. We want to create safe workplaces. And ultimately, we want our brand to be viewed that way publicly across the entire globe. And so how is it moving away from the compliance function? You heard Rich and Evan speak about earlier how this isn't just about meeting the needs of the DOT or the FMCSA. We're looking at this as a full end-to-end employment cycle where we are reducing risk across the organization. And so this is really how it's moving from being a compliance function or checking a box to really taking your company by the reins and ensuring that you are truly driving efficiency throughout and reducing that risk across the life cycle.
So Rich and Evan, you both actually brought up data points a little bit earlier. So I'd like to go into that a little bit more. What types of decisions are better enabled for employers with this data that they did not have before? Rich, I'll start with you, and then Evan will come to you next.
Yeah, I'll just throw out a few off the top of my head. I think, when you have access to this data that's being updated continuously, it gives you the opportunity to be more proactive on a couple of key areas. One example is out of service orders. For regulated transportation carrier, out of service orders, they're some of the most disruptive and costly yet preventable types of issues. And the vast majority of them, a lot of them, it could be a vehicle maintenance issue, and that's another topic. But a significant number of them are administrative in nature. So you had an expired license, you had an expired med cert, you had the wrong endorsement for the type of cargo you're hauling. And those are all simple fixes if you know ahead of time that those are issues. And monitoring provides visibility ahead of time. So you can be proactive. So you can get those licenses renewed, get those med certs updated, and be sure you're getting the right people behind the wheel. Monitoring also provides visibility into behavioral issues, new violations, identifying trends of risky behavior. Do you have a driver who's, showing they're speeding, and you can get in front of that. You can provide proactive coaching before that becomes an issue. So having the visibility into the driver performance and driver behavior, again, allows you to be proactive as well. Go ahead, Evan.
No, sorry. I thought you were done there, Rich. Sorry. Didn't mean to cut you
I'll
off.
just keep droning on and on.
We've got
Well,
time.
I think one of the things that you touched on that I really find it really important is the operational aspects, right? Hey, does this person have the right type of endorsement for this vehicle and this load? It is incredibly important because it's on-road risk. There's so many things that are required from a compliance perspective that are not directly on-road risk from an out-of-service perspective. I don't think we can like state that enough, right? The operational challenges, and then you can get into, routing and dispatch pieces, not just tied to the load, but does this person have aspects specific to, inner city areas, right? Like high congestion things that they need to worry about. So having the data allows a lot of the operational aspects along with the compliance pieces. Sorry, I got too excited and cut you off on that, but I think that's really important to make sure we touched on.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. I'm going to Rich for the next question anyway. He can keep talking. So, Rich, can continuous driver monitoring impact insurance exposure?
So it absolutely can. Commercial insurance, commercial auto insurance in particular, it's been under a tremendous amount of pressure for the last decade. It's losing money, largely the result of nuclear verdicts and costs associated with underwriting these types of risk. And fleets that have robust screening programs, meaning they're putting qualified drivers behind the wheel on day one, that they're running compliant operations, and they have robust safety programs, they can get favorable terms with their insurance carriers, but they have to be able to tell that story effectively. And with the data, with reporting, and with the ability to tell the story and highlight your safety program with data, that's what's going to help you get favorable terms with when it comes time to renew that policy.
Well, this episode obviously wouldn't make any sense if we weren't bringing First Advantage and SambaSafety together. So let's talk about that combined value for the companies now. Ken, how are First Advantage and SambaSafety creating a lifecycle trust solution?
Yeah, so interesting. We talked a lot about efficiency gained here. We talked a lot about reducing risk, but obviously if this all comes at the expense of time within your organization or complex process, it becomes really, really ineffective in the long run, because you may not be collecting accurate information. You may not be moving drivers in and out of your rosters appropriately. And so what this really comes down to is ensuring that your solution from end to end is really integrated both for your users and your drivers or candidates alike. And so what's really unique about what we deliver here is from the moment the driver applies in your applicant tracking system, all the way through the background check, the DOT application, the verifications that we're completing, and through creating a DQ file, in entering folks into the monitoring system, and then going ahead and monitoring them. This is all one unique workflow in our platform. And so the amazing thing is this doesn't cause any additional labor or work on your team to bring all of these pieces together. And so ultimately this full life cycle gives you the ability to monitor, again, not just your regulated drivers, but everybody, reduce risk across the organization without causing additional labor or workload for your team.
Yeah, so let's lean into kind of all of those integrated pieces a little bit more. Evan and Rich, what unique advantages are companies seeing when it's First Advantage and SambaSafety integrated versus purchased separately? So Evan, I'll start with you and then Rich.
Yeah, I think the piece Ken just touched on is all of those pieces in one closed loop. I mean, you could start an order And then your output is you have a driver file, right? If the MVR doesn't need review and those employment verifications are all clear, like it's conceptual to start an order and get to a driver file with no additional touch points from your team. And what that allows is really reduction in the blind spots, right? Now you don't have all of the different systems of like, here's my DOT app. Do the accidents listed here match what was reported on the PSP or the employment verification? That's all part of the screen. You don't have the blind spots of, okay, we have the MVR, but is there driver training that should be based off of that? Or is there the continuous aspect of that rather than periodic? So with First Advantage and SambaSafety together, it's the entire process holistically, which is really creating such a tight connection that it doesn't allow risk to really rise up between systems because there's end-to-end visibility in the process.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the things that excites me most about the partnership here between SambaSafety and First Advantage is exactly what Ken and Evan talked about. It's the elimination of those friction points between critical operations. So one of the biggest early friction points to adopting monitoring is getting your driver roster ready to go. Who's driving? What state do they live in? What's their date of birth? What's their driver's license number? All that stuff is contained in the background screen. So that connectivity from the screen into continuous monitoring is seamless and frictionless, which is a huge benefit. And then the pushing of the relevant data into the qualification file on the First Advantage side. Again, huge friction point, totally eliminated. And now you've got this platform that can drive additional workflows and automations in your environment, whether it's assigning training, coaching, annual reviews, you name it. So again, it's all about freeing up our customers to focus on more strategic things in their environment and not pushing paper from one folder to another.
Let's move now in talking about identity and kind of creating that missing link. So Ken, where does identity fit into this entire picture that y'all are painting today?
Great question. And I guess that opens the door for identity in general. And rather than saying where it fits into the picture for just today, I would broaden that and say that this is part of the picture for the future for every background check, for every DQ file, for every person that we put into monitoring. Reason being is in order to ensure that the person that we are moving through our process digitally is the same analog person, I'm sorry to put this into digital analog terms, but is the same person that we are speaking to throughout the process. Now, within the transportation space, this could get pretty complex, especially if we have for-hire drivers that are running routes and maybe we don't actually get to see the driver, or you're a large carrier and you've got thousands and thousands of drivers and nobody is doing a facial inspection every day to see who shows up. So identity really closes that gap between the individual and the data that we are searching for. And it's becoming more and more prevalent to the fact that while we're talking about it for pre-employment and pre-hire, it's much like the monitoring where we're moving to a world of persistent identity. So how do I know that Evan shows up the first day it's Evan, but the next day it's somebody that looks a lot like Evan, but it isn't Evan? So it's important that not only do we consider who they were on day one, but it's the same person that we have throughout the life cycle of employment with our organization. Remember, in the end, we're all looking to reduce risk, create a safer workplace, and these are ways that we're continuing to use technology to drive to that place.
Right. Someone on LinkedIn did comment that identity is the key. I think that is correct, and we all agree there. So I'm confident that this is actually the real Evan that we want to speak to. So I will ask you the next question. Can you share a real-world scenario where identity and driver monitoring could help mitigate a major risk event?
Yeah, absolutely. And I am the real Evan. I can prove it. I have my driver's license. It's fine.
Let's do the whole check on this.
We'll do it all.
Here.
I think the thing that really strikes me is all of the things that get delivered to my house. And sure, someone maybe went to a location and picked up the truck, but they could do that theoretically 2 or 3 times and then give the keys to someone else, right? Are we validating throughout the day that this person on the route, sure, we have GPS tracking and we have the hours of service devices and all of those things together, but without identity matching that the person behind the wheel that we expect to be behind the wheel is the right person, there's risk in that. And I think that's where the identity aspect comes into play, of, people going in neighborhoods and near schools and dropping off on people's doorsteps. There's a lot of potential there, for things to go awry, and identity can really reduce the risk of that by ensuring that the individual that you did identity on up front, that you hired because of their sterling background check and all of the great things that they have in place, all of those things come together with the ongoing part as well. So there's potential exposure, in not doing that identity that could really lead to a major event.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we've been talking about, this life cycle the entire time. So we're actually going to close this full loop here on the life cycle with 2 questions, and then we'll close out with some takeaways. You guys like what I did there? All right, so Rich, what does a full life cycle trust model look like when all of these elements come together?
Yeah, I'm going to spend a little bit more time, I think, maybe talking about identity than I had planned. I think I agree with Evan. Identity is absolutely critical, especially in this post-pandemic, decentralized work from anywhere world that we live in now. Knowing who you're employing and eventually who you're monitoring is absolutely critical. And we find there's a lot of drivers out there that are in positions of trust. They're school bus drivers, they're utility workers that enter homes, they're home healthcare workers. So identity is fundamental as well in this equation. So when we think about that full life cycle, it's identity, it's compliance, it's safety, and it's coaching. And these 4 things provide the framework for best-in-class operations, in my opinion. Better hiring. Are you getting the best available drivers out there that are qualified, that are going to be successful and represent your brand? Are you streamlining the compliance and making your operations as efficient as possible? The last thing you want to do is push the burden of compliance onto the driver, because that is not going to end well. Improving the driver performance. So knowing how they're performing, knowing how they're driving, knowing when they begin to exhibit risky behaviors, which then allows you to intervene, coach, improve driver performance. And if you can do that, you have this almost unintended impact on retention. And we know finding qualified drivers is incredibly difficult these days. There is a shortage of 80,000 professional drivers today. That's only going to go up. And I hate to break it to you, 8 autonomous vehicles are not going to dig us out of that hole. You're going to have a deficit of qualified drivers for a very long time. So retention is incredibly important. If you invest in your drivers, if you care about them, if you remove the friction from their day-to-day so they're not sending you photocopies of paper documents, and you coach and make them better and invest in their careers, they're going to stick around. And you're not going to have to go backfill drivers.
All right, so my last question is for all 3 of you. We're going to go in this order. We're going to go Ken, Evan, and Rich. So what future capabilities become possible when you have persistent identity checks plus continuous monitoring of driving records? So Ken, we'll start with you.
Sure. So obviously, this is the nirvana of the process that we are ultimately headed towards. But when you combine identity, continuous monitoring, along with this end-to-end integrated life cycle that we are talking about, I think what you get in the end is a safer workplace, a place where people can come to work and feel that safety, not just with the employees around them, but within the company and the organization. And so I think that's what it is all about. And we would agree that this is the what we're looking for in the end. And by following these steps, that's how you get there. That's how you create this workplace environment for your organization.
Yeah, I was going to say safer roads, which sounds a whole lot like safer workplaces. So I'm going to have to switch it up a little bit. I think the thing that having the identity and the monitoring all together with the compliance pieces and the retraining capability, it's faster intervention. It's knowing when to intervene and who to intervene with, and that is ultimately going to lead to safer workforces and safer roads. But the ability to identify and be proactive in finding those things to drive faster intervention, it is really the future end state, right? It's even further shrinking that potential knowledge gap between an event and when we should have known.
So, yeah, I mean, safer roads, safer workplaces, absolutely. But the risk of being redundant, I have to think of a different one. I would say happier drivers. If we can reduce the friction and we can let drivers spend more time doing what they like to do, which is driving. Most people are driven to this vocation because they love driving. Happier driver is going to be a safer driver. I have zero scientific data to tell me that, but I believe it in my core.
Mm-hmm.
If you enjoy what you're doing and you're invested in what you're doing, you're going to be better at it. So yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity.
That's great. Well, quickly to our audience that is tuning in live, this is your last chance to put forth any questions that you may have. We do have a comment that's coming in right now that you guys can take a look at, but it's really talking around identity and that kind of access management. So really good engaged group we have right now, especially on LinkedIn. I'm seeing a ton of stuff come through on there. So while we wait for any potential questions to come in from the audience, for the three of you, final takeaways, what do you want the audience to leave with today when I hit that end live stream button? So I'll come to all three of you. Evan, we can start with you here.
Yeah, I think the message is move from transaction to managing trust, right? This is all a transactional aspect that we've been talking about and trying to spread the good news of it doesn't have to be transactional, but move from a transaction piece by piece in separate systems to a holistic view of trust from a driver compliance and safety perspective.
Rich, final thoughts, takeaway from you?
If you're running these functions in silos, your pre-screening, your compliance, your safety program, it can seem super intimidating to try and integrate them. But my advice would be don't let it spook you. Integration, like what we're talking about today between First Advantage and SambaSafety, streamlines and simplifies the ability to bring these disciplines together, reduce the swivel chair and administrative burden, the potential for errors. And again, I think all of us could think of 10 things we would rather be focused on day to day that are more strategic than a lot of the manual processes we have. So there is a huge opportunity here, and you don't have to do it on your own.
Ken?
Yeah, what hasn't been said by these two phenomenal folks that are joining me?
You could tell a joke, do something. Okay.
I'll close out with this, just tying it all together. If you're looking to have happier drivers, safer roads, and a safe workplace, then it's critical that you take a look at this holistically, and it isn't just about screening, it's about bringing an experience to your organization and moving to that life cycle of trust. And I think that's what it's about for all of us. And within our hearts, we're all looking for that safe place. And that's what I think the big takeaway is here.
Ken, you nailed it. I can see that being a quote for marketing to use in future, the future state. So, hats off to the three of you. Phenomenal panel and really just great content throughout this entire episode. I know our audience is walking away, whether they're tuning in live right now or watching it on demand, with very important insights and really just great takeaways that they can bring back to their organizations. So if you are interested in talking about this further, feel free to reach out to Ken, Rich, and Evan on LinkedIn. You can also, come to our website, fadv.com. You can read more about our partnership with SambaSafety as well. We've got a ton of content out there. You can also tune into the next episode of FA Live if you want to get more information. But yeah, I want to thank everyone that was able to tune in today. Again, whether you're watching live or you're watching the on-demand version. And then thank you to my panelists. So Rich, Ken, and Evan, thank you, all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I will catch everyone on the next episode. And again, thank you so much.